I'm here in a conservation lab at our Chappelle Collection Center, and I'm accompanied by some very precious objects. Every artifact at our collection center tells a personal story from the Holocaust, and our conservators take great care to preserve all of them for generations to come. At first glance, this particular group of objects, a very old Mickey Mouse figurine, a box, a flower garland, may not seem to have much to do with Pride Month, but they belonged to a gay teenager in France named Pierre Seel. Please post your questions in the comments about Pierre and we'll try to answer them. In the months before Germany invaded France in spring 1940 and took over the region of Alsace, Pierre was falling in love with a young man named Joe. It was his first significant romantic relationship. Amid these seismic shifts in his own life, Germany was invading France, and in spring 1940 it took over the region of Alsace where Pierre lived. Pierre's relationship with Joe was his first significant romantic one. Pierre watched as his community changed practically overnight. The local government was taken over by German officials and Nazi sympathizers, and the street sign outside his house was changed from Rue Sauvage to Adolf Hitler Strasse. Pierre witnessed as a Jewish trainee from his parents' pastry shop was beaten and humiliated by German police in a public courtyard, and Pierre never saw him again. One day in May 1941, the Gestapo, the German secret police, came looking for Pierre. He was interrogated, he was sexually assaulted, and he was imprisoned. The Nazi German regime targeted gay men for harassment and at times also arrest. What led them to look for Pierre? Well, months earlier, Pierre had reported that his watch had been stolen in a public square which was known as a gay hangout, and he filed a report with the French police. Pierre was only 17 years old, and it never occurred to him, while he was so focused on his lost watch, that by filing this report, he was publicly acknowledging his own sexuality. He signed a police report, and the French policeman who took it humiliated him. Young teenage Pierre burst into tears. That document was later used by the Germans as proof that Pierre was gay. They detained him and imprisoned him in a Nazi camp called Schirmeck for 6 months. Pierre wrote of the shame. Later, he wrote of the shame that he felt when he realized that this was the way that his parents would find out that he was gay. At the camp, Pierre was subject to terrible abuse, including the Germans using him as a test subject in pseudoscientific experiments. But as he recalled, the worst day that he experienced at the camp was one day when prisoners were forced to witness a particularly violent and brutal execution. Pierre recognized with horror that the young man who was being stripped of his clothes while classical music played was in fact his boyfriend, his old boyfriend, Joe. And Pierre watched in horror as guard dogs tore into Joe, ripping him apart. In November 1941, Pierre was finally released. He was only 18 years old, and on the evening that he returned home, his family was sitting at the dinner table. Pierre remembers that his father told him, "We won't say anything more about it," not wanting to talk of the reason his son had been away, and his mother tried to choke back tears. Even though the rule in their house was silence, Pierre, of course, could not forget the trauma that he had just endured. Each night, his nightmares woke everyone in the home, and still feeling the scars and memories of the deprivation that he had suffered in the camp, he would raid the cupboards in the middle of the night, searching for food. For many years, Pierre followed his father's admonition and did not share his story. But later, when his mother was dying of cancer, she finally implored him, "Tell me everything." And Pierre did. Pierre told her everything about his love for Joe, about the sexual assault by the Germans, and about being forced to witness Joe's murder. Pierre's mother also shared how she suffered while he was imprisoned. We have comments from viewers, including a woman named Camille writes that this was such a sad time in our history. Another viewer named Cindy wrote in to say, "Never forget how easy it was for neighbors and friends to turn against each other." Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Cindy. Pierre's mother gave her some very, very precious objects. She gave him a small box that contained a Mickey Mouse toy, a tiny figurine, and a garland that was from her wedding veil. You can see the mouse here nestled into the garland like a sort of cradle. She told Pierre that while he was imprisoned, she kept this little box next to her bed, and each night she would kiss the figurine, kiss the toy, as if it were Pierre, and pray that her son, that her baby, would return safely home to her. Pierre entrusted these objects to our museum before he died in 2005. They represent a mother's love, her hope for that her son would return, and her eventual acceptance of him in the fullness of his identity. Today, they also help us to share the story of a lesser-known group of victims targeted by the Nazis. Thank you for joining us.